Welcome back. For many Americans, there's a pretty big disconnect over the economy. Experts point to numbers and data and say that the economy appears to be pretty robust. But many non-economists and experts point to their dwindling savings and their rising bills, and they say we're living in a silent depression, and they're making their case on TikTok. Listen.
If you look back to the Great Depression, the house was only 3 times the average salary. Now it is 8 times the average salary. The car was 46% of the salary. The car today is 85% of the salary.
We are in a Great Depression. I mean, I said in another video, we're in the worst economic time in American history. We have the lowest purchasing power we have ever had in American history.
How are people affording life right now? How are people tackling this cost of living on the average American salary?
Next guest is pushing back in his own TikTok responses. Christopher Clark joins me now. He's an assistant professor of economics at Washington State University. Christopher, we're so glad to have you today. Thank you.
So happy to be here. Thank you.
So when you hear clips like that, what's your response as an economist? What do you say?
The first response is rather quite a surprise. The particular framing, the 1930s, the Great Depression, the worst period in American history, tremendous poverty, tremendous job loss. Today is nothing like that. But my second response is one of empathy. We've just experienced the largest inflation in my lifetime, and that's really disruptive for a lot of families.
And let me stick with that point there because, I think it's really important that you're adding context and facts and nuance. But there is something there, right? I mean, this isn't just perception. I mean, there's a reason why it resonated.
Oh, absolutely. And I think most of the creators on TikTok in these videos are genuine. They're trying to Google the numbers. They're trying to figure out a framework to describe an economic reality that most of us haven't experienced.
So if you could quickly, because we're on TV, which I know makes it a little bit harder, if you could explain some of what we heard in those clips. So when we're talking about the cost of a car back then versus now, the cost of a house back then versus now, but also if I could also add the cost of higher education, because that does seem to have really increased exponentially in our generations.
Sure. So a lot of these videos make a real quick comparison between the average car in the 1930s versus, the average car today. And the average car today is way faster, way higher quality, far safer. Even the cheapest car on the market today, which you can get for just less than $20,000, is far superior to any vehicle that was on the road in the 1930s. Home ownership rates are higher today than they were there. Only half of the homes had an indoor toilet in the 1930s. So a lot of these folks aren't comparing apples to apples, and they arrive at those conclusions.
What about income inequality? We talk a lot about over the pandemic, we saw wealth increase, but by and large, I mean, that lifted up sort of the low and middle income, but it really lifted up the upper middle class who have a lot of stocks. They're invested in the markets. They're sitting on equity in their homes. What about income inequality?
Sure. The firsthand, your absolute standard of living is 3 to 4 times better for nearly everybody. But for some people, it's far more than that. And we care not just, do I have a better standard of living than I did before, but how is the fairness? How is the equality of opportunity? Can I work hard and get ahead as much as anyone else? And for the past 40 years, the income inequality levels have continued to rise. And that upsets our sense of justice and fairness.
So why is that, do you think? Because there was a period after the 1930s that I think you pointed out that the disparity actually started to decline. And then in the 1970s, I believe you pointed out, it started to sort of widen again.
Yeah. So some of that wasn't great. A lot of the wealth at the top was destroyed at the Great Depression. But in that period, we invested tremendously in education, and we also invested in home ownership. The most important part of the GI Bill wasn't just the education subsidies, but it was the access to home ownership. And it lifted a whole generation, including my grandparents, out and into the middle class. And these types of policies haven't been funded at the levels that they have been funded at before.
And Christopher, really quickly before I let you go, I know you're an economist, but I also know that you care about sort of young people. This is why you take your message to TikTok.
Yeah.
What's the message for people who they hear you, but they say, look, I don't know. I see the data, but that doesn't really reflect my reality. What's your message to those viewers?
Yeah, I would say the majority of the people are seeing wage gains supersede inflation, at least here at the end of 2023. But that isn't true for everybody. And I would say we have one of the best job markets we have right now. Unions are getting great gains. And I express a lot of empathy and also a lot of hope that things can improve.
Christopher Clark, great to see you, and I love your content. It's so nice to have someone on social media just sort of bringing economy. I'm a business reporter, so I love the economy, but bringing the economy and business topics to the masses. Great to see you. Hope you come back soon.
So nice chatting. Thank you.
Yeah.